All right, having said that, let's get back to our series, Making the Case for Israel as the Jewish people's homeland. Making the Case for Israel, the Jewish people's homeland. We began this series with an overarching first section, which is going to take weeks, and that is exploring the biblical record. What does the biblical record say theologically and historically regarding the case for Israel and their right to the land? And the biblical record dates from 2000 BC, the time of Abraham, all the way up through past the New Testament era, the time of the Second Roman Revolt, 135-ish AD. So we begin the first subsection of this larger section. The biblical record has to do with covenants. That is the subsection in which we are now. In the subsection, we have laid out what the Abrahamic covenant has to say regarding the promise that God gave the land to the Jewish people. We looked at Abraham. We looked at Isaac. We looked at Jacob. We saw in fact, take a look at this map. We'll be looking at it again. These are the boundaries of the promised land, including that striped section. That's the boundaries as laid out in Genesis 15 of the promised land. We saw that the birth of Ishmael doesn't really impact the Abrahamic covenant because the Abrahamic covenant does not go through Ishmael. It goes through his son Isaac. We saw that it goes from Isaac, and from Isaac it continues through not to Ishmael, but to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. I pointed out when Sarah died, and this was actually the Bible makes a big deal of this, especially Genesis, regarding the one plot of land, even though all of the land is promised to the Jewish people in perpetuity, that at the time of the patriarchs, there actually only was one plot that actually was physically purchased, an actual transaction, and over and over again, that transaction is mentioned, and that has to do with the cave of Machpelah in the plot of Mamre, where Abraham and Sarah were buried. The area of Hebron. After Abraham is buried in this area, we have Isaac and Jacob, the Abrahamic covenant continuing through Isaac and Jacob. Jacob receives the name Israel, and the Abrahamic covenant, that basket, that complex of promises that contain much more than just land, but we're only focusing on the land promise in this series, and we're seeing that not only Israel is a recipient of the Abrahamic covenant, but the 12 tribes as well, including Joseph, and that they will be taken back to the land of promise, the land of Canaan, and specifically mentioning the burial location once again, multiple times, the burial location in Machpelah, which is outside of Hebron. Joseph dies. He expects when the Jewish people return to their land that they are going to take his bones up from there. Then we got to this is the new section we started last week, Moses and the Abrahamic covenant. We've only looked at Genesis up to that point. Then we look at Exodus and how Moses, prior to the covenant at Sinai, to the Mosaic covenant, how Moses interacts with the Abrahamic covenant. And we looked at the burning bush, and we've seen the Lord say, I am aware of your sufferings, and I have come down to deliver the Jewish people, the people of Israel, and bring them to that promised land. That's Exodus 3. This is at the at the burning bush. And then Exodus 6, 3 chapters later, with Moses now back going to his people who are slaves in Egypt. We have the reiteration of God's plan and program. This is exactly what we commemorate, what we remind ourselves of with the 4 cups at Passover. And I've established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they sojourned. I have heard the groaning, and I have remembered my covenant. What covenant? Moses is reiterating, or the Lord is reiterating to Moses, the Abrahamic covenant. So we have these promises. I am the Lord. I will bring you out. I will deliver you. So I will cup of sanctification, cup of deliverance. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, great judgment, cup of redemption. That is the cup, by the way, that we commemorate when we participate in communion. It is that cup, the 3rd cup, that our Lord took and added great significance, not just the significance of God redeeming his people from the bondage of Egyptian slavery, but for all who believe, Jew or Gentile alike, to be liberated from the bondage of our sin and be forgiven for our sins. And then we have the cup of consummation in 7 and 8. I'll take you for my people, I'll be your God. You will know that I'm the Lord your God who brought you out from the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land. This is where we left last week, 2 weeks ago rather. I'll bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. So, summarizing that great amount of summary we've already done thus far in 5 minutes. Genesis and at least the first few chapters of Exodus emphasize, reiterate, repeat over and over again. Repetition for the sake of emphasis. The connection between the Jewish people and this specific land, with specific borders given. So having said that, let us move on and let's get to let's continue with the idea of Moses and the Abrahamic covenant, and then we'll get to the Mosaic covenant. So, even though the Mosaic covenant has already been given, what Moses argues, when this is after the golden calf, and God is really angry at his people, and Moses entreats the Lord on behalf of his people. Moses entreated the Lord as God and said, "O Lord, why does your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand?" Skipping a few. Remember, go back to the Abrahamic covenant, which is the main theme of Genesis. If you want to talk about something that is mentioned the most, what's the one idea, the big idea that is mentioned over and over and over and over again in the book of Genesis, and to this point in the book of Exodus? It is not the sinfulness of man, it is not the break in fellowship that man's sin has made, the need for redemption. It is the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And that relationship is exemplified, is concretized, is clothed with overalls by the very concrete promise of a very specific land. Not just any old land, but a very specific land with borders mentioned over and over and over and over again. And so Moses knows this, and he argues on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, that's Jacob, your servants to whom you swore by yourself. Nobody bigger for God to swear by but himself. There's no other bigger power. If God wants to bring out the big guns and show, this is how committed I am, you'll see it doesn't happen very often. But when it does, you pay attention, because God swore by himself. Genesis 22. Abrahamic covenant. and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heavens, and all this land of which I have spoken I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. Now, remember that when it comes to theology, there's no arguing with this, okay? From a theological perspective, it is very clear what God is promising, what he's not promising, what he is promising, what he's saying, what he's not saying. It's very, very clear. And again, repeated ad infinitum. But if you are not persuaded by a theological argument, in other words, if you don't believe in God, then it wouldn't really matter what God actually says. So I don't just argue theologically here. I argue historically. So whether or not you want to posit that God is a fantastic, by which I mean fantasy, not fantastic, which idea, is not an idea, it's true. But if you just want to say, okay, I can't buy into the God thing, you certainly cannot ignore the historical evidence of documents that were time of Moses is 3,500 years ago. 3,500 years of Jewish history, of believing, understanding, having a certitude that the land of Canaan is indeed the Jewish homeland promised by their God. You may think that they're believing a fantasy, but you cannot argue with the historical fact that this has been the Jewish understanding of this land for 3,500 years. There is no other people who have this kind of understanding. There's no precedent in history for a people believing that a land was given, a specific land with borders, was given to them by God, and believing that same thing, with that same borders, for 3,500 years. The land of which I have spoken I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it. How long? Forever. Next chapter. God, who has forgiven his people, thanks to Moses' prayer, based upon the Abrahamic covenant, God says to them, depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you brought up from the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore. So now God is directing Moses to act on the basis of what Moses reminded God that he had promised. And so on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant, this is how integral the Abrahamic covenant is to Torah. This is how integral the relationship of God, his people, and their land is in Torah. You cannot divvy them up. You cannot separate them. You cannot shuffle. No matter how you shuffle it up, no matter how you sort it out, it always comes down to God, his people, and the land, as recorded in the Torah. Those are the fundamental foundations upon which the Jewish people have always stood. So depart, go to the land in which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying to your descendants, I will give it. Now, that's the last time that Moses is going to argue, last major time, that Moses is going to argue based upon the Abrahamic covenant, a few minor places, but I don't want to belabor the point. So now we move on to see, what does the Mosaic covenant, which is not given until Exodus 20 and forward in Torah, it's not given until, what does the Mosaic covenant have to say about the relationship between the Jewish people and the land? Does it reiterate? Does it magnify? Does it amplify? What is the relationship between the Mosaic covenant and the Jewish people's possession or right to the land? If we look at Leviticus, and this is not a chapter that many people read. It is a chapter much like we will find in Deuteronomy, the end of Deuteronomy. It's a chapter of blessings and curses. And we pick it up, because I don't want to belabor an entire chapter of blessings and cursings. We'll just summarize that if you break the Mosaic covenant, here's what's going to happen. You will perish among the nations, and your enemy's land will consume you. That doesn't sound congruent with the Abrahamic covenant. How does this work? Let's see if we can see. 39. So that those of you who may be left in the land will rot away because of their iniquity in the lands of your enemies, and also because of the iniquities of their forefathers, they will rot away with them. And they shall confess their iniquity. So, there are, while the ownership of the land for the Jewish people as a corporate entity is inviolable. You cannot shake it. You cannot break it. What you can do is every generation can determine by their actions whether or not that particular generation is worthy of enjoying possession of the land. The land is owned, but the land technically was owned by the Jewish people for the 400 years they were in Egypt as well. But they didn't enjoy the land. And so God is telling, through the Mosaic covenant, that based upon obedience or disobedience to this particular covenant, which is not the Abrahamic covenant, it's alongside the Abrahamic covenant, based upon your obedience or disobedience to the Mosaic covenant, you will determine whether or not you as a generation will enjoy possession of the land, or whether the land will be devoid of your presence, or the majority of your presence, for a period of time. And your behavior will have direct repercussions not only for your specific generation, but for generations to come, your children's children. So notice there is an antidote to what happens when the Jewish people are temporarily dispossessed of enjoyment of the land that they own. God tells us in verse 40, and they shall confess, and the nations to which God has driven them, and their suffering, they shall confess their iniquity, and the iniquity of their forefathers, generational repercussions, generational consequences, in their unfaithfulness which they committed against me, and in their acting with hostility against me. You break the Mosaic covenant, in other words. If you're under the system of the Mosaic covenant and you break it, then you are acting with hostility against the Lord. What happens is I also were acting with hostility against them to bring them in the land of their enemies. But what's going to happen is they will confess their sins. They will come to their senses. And then their uncircumcised heart becomes humbled, so that they will then make amends for their iniquity. In other words, according to the Mosaic covenant, the sign of the Abrahamic covenant, physical circumcision, is insufficient to determine possession of the land for any given generation. Depends on the behavior. And there will be consequences for generations to come regarding the acts of each generation or their ancestors. But no matter what the punishment may be, their uncircumcised heart will become humbled. And they will confess their sins. They'll make amends for their iniquity. And when that happens, I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham as well, and I will remember the land. So, possession of the land, ownership, in other words, of the land, is on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant. There is nothing that the Jewish people can do, according to the Bible, not according to me, according to the Bible, that would violate and invalidate God's guarantee of Jewish ownership, right to the land. However, when we bring the Mosaic covenant in, the Mosaic covenant is very clear that enjoyment of the land is not a guarantee. Possession, ownership of the land is. Even when you're out of the land, you still own the land. But you may not get to possess, or enjoy rather, the land based upon your relationship with the Mosaic covenant. But when you confess your sins, when you come to your senses, God says, I will then, on the basis of not the Mosaic covenant, but on the basis of my faithful promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant, I will bring you back. I will remember the land. For the land will be abandoned by them. They will make up for its Sabbaths while it is made desolate without them. Yet in spite of this, when they are not, or when they rather, are in the land of their enemies, in other words, when there is worldwide dispersion, God will not reject them. I will not reject them, nor will I abhor them so as to destroy. I'm going to be mad. God says, I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be a little upset. In fact, I'm going to be a lot upset. But I will never be so upset so as to wipe out my people, Israel. They are my chosen because of my relationship with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're not really chosen because they received the Mosaic covenant. They're chosen because I chose, 400 years prior to the Mosaic covenant, I chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, really, I chose Abraham, and Isaac and Jacob are the beneficiaries of being a descendant of the guy I chose, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 12 tribes, etc., etc. So while they're in the land of the, I will not reject them. God, nor will I abhor them so as to destroy them, breaking my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God. God will never break his covenant with them. God, no matter how the Jewish people behave, God will always be faithful to his guarantees. And I will remember them. I'll remember for them the covenant with their ancestors, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nation. Now this is where the Abrahamic covenant meets the Mosaic covenant. I will remember I brought them out. Why did I bring them out of Egypt? Because of the Abrahamic covenant. And once I brought them out of Egypt, what did I give them? The Mosaic covenant, so that they could be in relationship with me. And I brought them out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. I am Jehovah. I am the covenant God. Now remember what happens going now beyond Leviticus to Numbers. Remember what happened when the spies, we talked about this months ago when we did Hebrews. The 12 spies are sent by Moses. Go check out the land and give us a report. And 10 spies give a lousy report. 2 spies give a good report, Joshua and Caleb. And the Jewish people say, we can't take the land. It's too hard. God, why did God do this? And God takes their lack of faith as rebellion. And he determines that you're going to, that generation that disbelieved me, that rebelled against me, is going to drop in the wilderness. But their children will enjoy, they will own and enjoy the land based upon the Mosaic and the Abrahamic covenant. And so now in 14, God is dealing with this issue. Now if you slay this people as one man, this is Moses praying again for his people. If you slay this people as one man, The nations who've heard of your fame will say, because the Lord could not bring this people into the land which he promised them by oath. Moses, remembering the Abrahamic covenant, therefore he slaughtered them in the wilderness. So God obviously responds once again. This is a really good argument to make with God. He responds to this argument pretty positively on the regular every time it's used. God, remember the Abrahamic covenant. And God says, yeah, okay, now that you mention it, got it. Okay. So the land which he promised them by oath, that's the Abrahamic covenant. And then wrapping up Numbers 33, speak to the sons of Israel, say to them, when you cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, here's what you need to do. Drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Destroy all their figured stones, destroy all their molten images, destroy all their high places, all their idols, in other words. And you shall take possession of the land and live in it. For why? I have given the land to you to possess it. On the basis of the Abrahamic covenant expressed through the Mosaic covenant. This is how important, this is how essential understanding the covenants are in Torah. You will inherit the land by lot, according to your families. The larger you'll give more inheritance. To the smaller you give less inheritance. Wherever the lot falls to someone, that will be his. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants, I threw this in because this is very instructive. If you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, it was true 3,500 years ago in the time of Moses, and it's true today. It's always been true. If you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come about that those whom you let remain of them will become as pricks in your eyes and as thorns in your sides, and they will trouble you in the land in which you live. That was a warning God gave the Jewish people 3,500 years ago. It was true then, it remains true now. Finally, Numbers 34. We'll get to Deuteronomy next week. Command the sons of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall to you as an inheritance. Remember, it's going to fall to them by lots. Bigger families are going to get a lot, and smaller families are going to get small. But everybody's going to get it. But this is the land. And let me give you the borders, even the land of Canaan according to the border. Last time we've had specific borders regarding the land was in Genesis 15. They were specific, but there was some ambiguity as to exactly how far they went. Here's the border. Your southern sector shall extend, your southern border shall extend, and then so the south, I'm going to give you a border. The border will turn direction to the brook of Egypt. Its termination shall be at the sea. So very specifically, south to the sea and the brook of Egypt. As for the western border, the Great Sea, that's Mediterranean, that is its coastline, that shall be your west border. This is your north border. Draw your borderline from the Great Sea, go up to Mount Hor, and then do a few things here and a few things there. And now we're going to go east. I'm dancing around because 115 verses. For your eastern border, you shall also draw a line from Hazar Enan to Shepham. The border shall go down and reach to the slope on the east side of the Sea of Kinneret. That's the Sea of Galilee. Okay, the east side of the Sea of Galilee. And the border shall go down to the Jordan, and its termination shall be at the Salt Sea. This shall be your land according to the borders all around. So, now, Moses commanded the sons of Israel, saying, this is the land that you are portioned by lot. Among you is possession, which the Lord has commanded to give to the 9.5 tribes. 9.5 tribes are going to be on the west side of the Jordan, and 2.5 tribes will receive their possession across the Jordan on the east side, Trans-Jordan, opposite Jericho, eastward toward the sun rising. So, this is where we're going to leave you. This same map that I showed you before. Now, the striped area is what was promised ultimately by God in Genesis. What he lays out here is the green. He takes you from the green, see the green area, Brook of Egypt, same border, takes you to the green, and takes you all the way up to the north to Dan. But then the pink is actually what Moses is commanded. So ultimately, it's a lot larger than what Israel is going to be able to take at this point. But Moses is instructed, tell him, take the green and take the pink. Notice what's in the pink: Lebanon and Syria. All the way up north is Euphrates. That's part of the promised land, but it's not part of the land right now expected. Now, why didn't Israel take all of the promised land? They were unable to take all the promised land under Joshua. They simply did not do so. They did not have the ability to do so for whatever reason. And so not only is the striped area outside the green and the pink excluded at this point, and that's fine because Moses is not commanded regarding the striped area, going all the way up to Iraq and throughout all of Jordan. Remember, Moab, Edom, there are some areas, they're off limits to you right now. Don't hit Moab. However, they could not take the pink, even though the pink is included in the boundaries here in Numbers 34. They couldn't take the pink, Lebanon and Syria at this point, but that green area is what they actually wound up taking. So if you think about that green area, and actually part of that green area includes the, actually right over the Sea of Galilee, includes the Golan Heights, but they don't have the whole green area today, and they don't have a lot of what the green area is today. But nonetheless, the promise of God is not just what Israel has and possesses today, but is, as you can see, far more extensive. It includes a portion of Jordan, it includes Lebanon, it includes Syria, it includes what we call the West Bank, that's Judea and Samaria, and it includes the Gaza Strip. Does Israel have a right to the land? Historically and theologically, according to Torah, according to the Abrahamic covenant, according to the Mosaic covenant, absolutely. Next time we will look at the land covenant and the Davidic covenant. The land covenant, the Davidic covenant, Deuteronomy, and then we'll go to the time of David. We'll see exactly what is promised there as we make our way toward the new covenant, which is ultimately what we celebrate, the ratification we celebrate each time we take communion. We'll be talking about the new covenant. The land is involved in the new covenant as well. So again, from a historical point of view, from a theological point of view, Israel most assuredly has a very clear, undisputable right to their land. We'll talk about more covenants next time, but for right now, let's stand for the Aaronic benediction.